She had dreamed of this day her entire life. The dress, the music, the guests, everything seemed perfect. But the moment Tanisha looked into her fiancé's eyes, something inside her screamed to run. And then, right in front of everyone, he did the unthinkable. The slap echoed through the hall, silencing the celebration. What happened next? No one could believe. The glittering Los Angeles skyline stretched out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxurious West Side hotel suite. Tanisha Johnson stood before the full-length mirror, her reflection a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. The ivory silk of her wedding gown hugged her curves, its intricate beadwork catching the warm California sunlight. Yet, despite the beauty of the moment, an inexplicable weight pressed down on her chest. "Girl, you look absolutely stunning," Jada, her best friend since childhood, exclaimed as she fussed with the train of Tanisha's dress. "Jason won't know what hit him when he sees you walking down that aisle." Tanisha managed a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks, Jay. I just hope everything goes smoothly." As if on cue, a sharp knock on the door cut through the room's nervous energy. Jada opened it to reveal Jason's mother, Gianna Hartley, her tailored designer suit a reflection of her rigid demeanor. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Gianna said, her tone suggesting she couldn't care less if she was. Her eyes swept over Tanisha, a flicker of disapproval crossing her features. "I just wanted to make sure everything is in order." Tanisha felt her shoulders tense. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Hartley. Thank you for checking." Gianna's lips thinned into a tight smile. "Well, I'm glad to hear it. Jason is quite particular about appearances, you know. It would be a shame if anything were to disappoint him today." The words hung in the air like a threat, and Tanisha felt her stomach churn. As Gianna turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Oh, and Tanisha, do try to smile more. This is supposed to be a joyous occasion after all." As the door clicked shut behind her, Jada let out a low whistle. "Damn, that woman could freeze hell over with that attitude. You sure you want to marry into that family niche?" Tanisha sank onto a nearby chaise lounge, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "Jason's not like her," she said, but even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. The truth was, doubts had been gnawing at her for weeks. Jason, the man she was about to pledge her life to, had been growing increasingly distant. His warm smiles and tender touches had given way to curt nods and distracted glances. She'd tried to chalk it up to pre-wedding jitters, but deep down she knew it was more than that. A soft ping from her phone drew her attention. It was a message from Jason. "Need to talk. Meet me in the garden in 5. Tanisha's heart raced as she made her way through the hotel's lush gardens, her heels sinking slightly into the manicured lawn. She found Jason pacing near a burbling fountain, his tuxedo immaculate, but his brow furrowed with worry. "Jason, what's wrong?" she asked, approaching him cautiously. He turned, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of her in her wedding dress. For a moment she saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with, but it quickly faded behind a mask of cool detachment. "Tanisha, there's something we need to discuss," he began, his voice low and controlled. "It's about the ceremony." She felt her heart sink. "What about it?" Jason ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a rare show of nervousness. "I've been thinking, maybe we should reconsider some of the, cultural elements you wanted to include." Tanisha blinked, not quite processing his words. "Cultural elements? You mean the jumping the broom tradition?" He nodded, not quite meeting her eyes. "Look, I know it's important to you, but my family, they're not really comfortable with it. They think it might not fit with the image we're trying to project." The words hit Tanisha like a physical blow. The tradition of jumping the broom, a symbol of African-American heritage, and the sweeping away of the old to make way for the new, had been one of the few things she'd insisted on for the ceremony. It was a connection to her roots, a homage to the strength of her ancestors. "Jason, we talked about this," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You said you understood how much it meant to me." He sighed, finally meeting her gaze. "I know, and I thought I did, but things are different now. My company's going public soon, and the board members will be at the wedding. We need to present a certain image." Tanisha felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "An image? And what image is that, exactly? One that erases who I am?" Jason's expression hardened. "That's not fair, Tanisha. You know how important this merger is for my career. I'm just asking you to compromise a little." "Compromise?" she repeated. the word tasting bitter on her tongue. It seems like I'm the only one doing any compromising here. A tense silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle splash of the fountain. In that moment, Tanisha saw her future laid out before her, a life of constantly shrinking herself to fit into Jason's world, of swallowing her heritage and her identity to maintain his precious image. But even as these realizations dawned on her, another part of her, the part that had dreamed of this day since she was a little girl, urged her to push the doubts aside. After all, every relationship required sacrifice, didn't it? "Fine," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll do it your way." Relief washed over Jason's face, and he leaned in to kiss her cheek. "Thank you, Tanisha. You won't regret this. I promise." As he walked away, leaving her alone in the garden, Tanisha couldn't shake the feeling that she already did. The ceremony itself was a blur of white tulle, fragrant flowers, and polite applause. Tanisha walked down the aisle on autopilot, her father's arm steady beneath her hand. She barely registered the words of the officiant, her responses coming automatically when prompted. As she and Jason exchanged rings, she searched his face for any sign of the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who had once told her that her strength and passion were what drew him to her. But all she saw was a polished mask, his smile practiced, and his eyes distant. The reception that followed was a study in contrasts. The ballroom was a vision of elegance, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables laden with gourmet food and premium champagne. The guests, a mix of Los Angeles elite and Tanisha's more modest family and friends, mingled awkwardly, the social divide as palpable as the tension in the air. Tanisha sat at the head table, a forced smile plastered on her face as she watched Jason work the room. He moved from group to group, his charm turned up to full wattage as he schmoozed with potential investors and business partners. She couldn't help but notice how his hand kept straying to his pocket, checking his phone every few minutes. Gianna, resplendent in a designer gown that probably cost more than Tanisha's entire wedding budget, held court at a nearby table. Her laughter, brittle and false, carried across the room as she regaled her friends with stories, her eyes occasionally flicking to Tanisha with thinly veiled disdain. "You okay, hun?" Jada's voice cut through Tanisha's thoughts. Her friend slid into the seat beside her, concern etched on her face. Tanisha nodded, not trusting her voice. Jada followed her gaze to where Jason stood, deep in conversation with a distinguished-looking older man. "He's been at that all night," Jada observed, her tone carefully neutral. "You'd think he'd want to spend some time with his new wife." "He's networking," Tanisha replied automatically, the excuse sounding weak even to her own ears. "It's important for his career." Jada raised an eyebrow but said nothing, squeezing Tanisha's hand instead. The gesture, small as it was, nearly broke Tanisha's carefully constructed composure. She blinked back tears, grateful for the dim lighting that hid her emotional struggle from the scrutiny of the guests. As the night wore on, the knot in Tanisha's stomach grew tighter. The cake had been cut, the first dance awkwardly performed, and now it was time for the speeches. She watched as Jason's best man, a frat brother from his college days, delivered a rambling toast full of inside jokes that left half the room confused and the other half forcing polite laughter. Then, to Tanisha's surprise, Gianna rose and tapped her glass for attention. A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to the mother of the groom. "I'd like to say a few words about my son and his new bride," Gianna began, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Jason has always had a big heart, always looking out for those less fortunate. It's one of the things I admire most about him." Tanisha felt her cheeks burn as Gianna's gaze settled on her, the implication of her words clear. The room had grown uncomfortably quiet, the tension palpable. "I suppose we should be grateful," Gianna continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "that Jason's charitable nature extends to his personal life as well. To the happy couple." She raised her glass in a toast, but the gesture felt more like a slap. Tanisha looked to Jason, silently pleading with him to say something, to defend her, but he merely smiled tightly and raised his own glass, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over her head. In that moment, as the polite applause of the guests washed over her, Tanisha felt more alone than she ever had in her life. She was surrounded by people, dressed in a gown worth thousands of dollars, and married to a man many would consider a catch. Yet she had never felt so invisible, so diminished. As the music resumed and the guests returned to their conversations, Tanisha excused herself, needing a moment alone. She made her way to the terrace, the cool night air a welcome relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. Leaning against the railing, she looked out over the twinkling lights of Los Angeles, a city of dreams and broken promises. She thought about the little girl she had once been, growing up in a modest neighborhood in South LA, dreaming of a fairy tale wedding and a happily ever after. That little girl seemed so far away now, lost in the glitz and glamour of a world that didn't seem to have room for her true self. As a tear slid down her cheek, Tanisha wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life, and if it was already too late to fix it. As the night deepened, the opulent ballroom of the West Side Hotel buzzed with a peculiar energy. The soft glow of chandeliers cast long shadows across the faces of guests, their laughter and chatter a discordant symphony against the backdrop of carefully curated music. Tanisha, still reeling from Gianna's thinly veiled insults, found herself adrift in a sea of unfamiliar faces, each one a reminder of how out of place she felt in this glittering world. She watched as Jason, her newly minted husband, worked the room with practiced ease. His tailored tuxedo fit him like a second skin, and his smile, the one that had once made her weak in the knees, now seemed plastered on, a mask he wore for the benefit of others. Every few minutes his hand would stray to his pocket, fishing out his phone to check it with barely concealed urgency. "Looks like someone's expecting an important call," Jada murmured, appearing at Tanisha's side with 2 flutes of champagne. She handed one to Tanisha, her eyebrows raised in a silent question. Tanisha accepted the drink gratefully, taking a long sip before responding. "It's probably work-related. You know how it is with the merger coming up." Jada's skeptical look spoke volumes. "Uh-huh, because nothing says wedding night like obsessively checking your email." Before Tanisha could respond, a tall, slender woman in a sleek black dress approached Jason. Her red hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she carried herself with an air of brisk efficiency that seemed at odds with the celebratory atmosphere. "That's Veronica," Tanisha explained to Jada in a low voice. "Jason's PR agent. She's been practically living at our place for the past month, prepping him for all the media attention the merger's going to bring." They watched as Veronica leaned in close to Jason, her lips moving rapidly as she spoke. Jason's brow furrowed, and he nodded seriously, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something, or someone. "Well, she certainly seems dedicated," Jada observed dryly. "You okay with her being so hands-on with your man?" Tanisha forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "It's not like that. She's just doing her job." "If you say so, honey." Jada's tone was skeptical, but she mercifully changed the subject. "So have you had a chance to talk to your folks? Your mom's been giving me the eye all night, probably wondering why I'm not pushing you to mingle more." Grateful for the distraction, Tanisha scanned the room for her parents. She found them seated at a table near the back, looking slightly overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding them. Her father, dignified in his rented tuxedo, sat ramrod straight, his discomfort evident in the way he tugged at his collar. Her mother, resplendent in a royal blue gown she'd saved for months to buy, was engaged in polite but stilted conversation with one of Jason's aunts. "I should go check on them," Tanisha said, setting down her champagne flute. "Will you be okay by yourself for a bit?" Jada grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Please, I spotted that cute cousin of Jason's earlier. I think it's time I introduced myself." As Tanisha made her way across the room, she couldn't help but notice the way conversations hushed as she passed. She caught snippets of whispered comments, some admiring, others less so. "Certainly is beautiful, but can you imagine her at the country club? Wonder how they met. You don't usually see people like her in Jason's circles. Brave of him, really, taking on a project like that." Each word was like a tiny barb, pricking at her self-confidence. By the time she reached her parents' table, Tanisha's smile felt brittle, ready to crack at any moment. "There's my girl," her father said warmly, standing to embrace her. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart." Her mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she took Tanisha's hands in hers. "We're so proud of you, baby. Look at all this." She gestured around the room, her voice filled with wonder. Tanisha felt a lump form in her throat. "Thanks, Mama. I'm just glad you're here." "We wouldn't have missed it for the world," her father assured her. Then, lowering his voice, he added, "Though I have to say, some of these folks make me feel like I showed up to a black tie event in my pajamas." "Dad," Tanisha chided gently, but she couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. Her father's ability to find humor in any situation had always been a source of comfort. "Oh, hush, Gerald," her mother scolded, though there was no real heat in her words. "We're just happy to see our baby girl married to a good man. Jason seems nice." The slight hesitation in her mother's voice didn't go unnoticed. Tanisha opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a cold voice cut through the air. "Well, isn't this quaint?" Tanisha turned to find Gianna standing behind her, a champagne flute held delicately in her manicured hand. The older woman's eyes swept over Tanisha's parents, her lip curling almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Hartley," Tanisha said, struggling to keep her tone even, "have you had a chance to speak with my parents? This is my father, Gerald, and my mother, Evelyn." Gianna's smile was as sharp as a knife's edge. "Charmed, I'm sure. I do hope you're enjoying yourselves. It must be quite different from what you're used to." Tanisha felt her father stiffen beside her, but his voice remained polite when he spoke. "It's certainly a beautiful affair. You and your husband must be very proud." "Oh, we are," Gianna agreed, her gaze fixed on Tanisha. "Though I must admit, this isn't quite how I imagined Jason's wedding. But then mothers-in-law don't get a say these days, do they?" The barb was thinly veiled, and Tanisha felt her cheeks burn. Before she could formulate a response, Gianna continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I was just telling my friends how refreshing it is to see Jason branching out. He's always had such a big heart, you know, always wanting to help the less fortunate." The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Tanisha's mother inhaled sharply, while her father's hand came to rest protectively on her shoulder. "Now, see here," her father began, but Tanisha cut him off with a gentle touch. "Thank you for your kind words, Mrs. Hartley," Tanisha said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "If you'll excuse us, I'd like a moment alone with my parents." Gianna's smile never wavered. "Of course, dear. Family is so important after all, even if some of us have different ideas about what that means." As Gianna glided away, Tanisha felt her composure begin to crumble. Her mother pulled her into a fierce hug, whispering words of comfort, while her father's face was a mask of concern and barely contained anger. "Don't you let that woman get to you, baby," her mother said fiercely. "You're worth 10 of her." Tanisha nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Over her mother's shoulder, she caught sight of Jason, still deep in conversation with Veronica. He hadn't so much as glanced in her direction during the entire exchange with Gianna. Maybe I should go talk to Jason," Tanisha said, gently extracting herself from her mother's embrace. He'd want to know if his mother was causing trouble. Her father's expression was doubtful, but he nodded. "All right, sweetheart, but remember, we're here if you need us. Always." With a grateful smile, Tanisha made her way across the room towards Jason. She could feel Gianna's eyes on her back, could almost hear the whispers following in her wake. By the time she reached her husband, her nerves were frayed to the breaking point. "Jason," she said, touching his arm lightly, "can I talk to you for a moment? In private?" Jason turned, surprise flickering across his face as if he'd forgotten she was there. "Tanisha, honey, can it wait? Veronica and I were just discussing some important PR strategies for—" "It's about your mother," Tanisha cut in, her voice low but urgent. "She's been saying some things to my parents." A flash of annoyance crossed Jason's features, quickly masked. "I'm sure it's nothing, Tanisha. You know how Mum can be. Why don't you just try to enjoy the party? We can talk about it later." Veronica, who had been listening to the exchange with barely concealed impatience, jumped in. "Jason, we really need to finalize these talking points. The merger announcement is just days away, and we can't afford any missteps." Jason nodded, already turning his attention back to Veronica. "You're right, of course. Tanisha, why don't you go mingle? I'm sure there are plenty of guests you haven't had a chance to meet yet." Dismissed. Tanisha stood there for a moment, stunned by the casual way Jason had brushed aside her concerns. She watched as he and Veronica huddled closer, their heads bent together over a smartphone, completely engrossed in whatever was on the screen. Feeling suddenly claustrophobic, Tanisha turned and made her way towards the terrace doors. She needed air, needed space to think, to breathe. As she pushed through the heavy glass doors, the cool night air hit her like a slap, shocking her system. The terrace was mercifully empty, the sounds of the reception muted behind her. Tanisha gripped the stone balustrade, her knuckles white as she struggled to regain her composure. The lights of Los Angeles sprawled out before her, a glittering tapestry of promise and possibility. But in that moment she felt more alone than she ever had in her life. "This isn't how it was supposed to be," she whispered to the night, her voice catching on a sob. Behind her, the doors to the terrace opened again. Tanisha quickly wiped at her eyes, plastering on a smile as she turned, expecting to see Jada or perhaps one of her relatives coming to check on her. Instead, she found herself face to face with Gianna. The older woman's eyes glittered with malice in the dim light. "Enjoying a moment alone, dear. It must be overwhelming, all this." She waved a hand dismissively at the opulent surroundings. "So different from what you're accustomed to." Tanisha straightened her spine, determined not to let Gianna see how deeply her words had cut. "Mrs. Hartley, I understand you have reservations about me, but—" "Reservations?" Gianna laughed, the sound brittle and cold. "My dear, that's putting it mildly. Let me be clear. You don't belong here, not in this world, and certainly not with my son." The words hit Tanisha like physical blows, each one chipping away at the careful facade she'd constructed. "I love Jason," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And he loves me." Gianna's smile was pitying. "Oh, you poor naive girl. Jason doesn't love you. He's fascinated by you, certainly. You're his little experiment, his way of proving how open-minded and progressive he is. But love? Please." Tanisha felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "You're wrong," she insisted, but even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. "Am I?" Gianna pressed, moving closer. "Then tell me, where is he now? On your wedding day, when he should be by your side, where is my son?" As if on cue, the terrace doors opened once more. Jason stepped out, his brow furrowed as he tapped away at his phone. He looked up, surprise registering on his face as he took in the scene before him. "Mom? Tanisha? What's going on out here?" Gianna's demeanor changed in an instant, her voice honeyed and solicitous. "Oh, nothing to worry about, darling. Tanisha and I were just having a little heart-to-heart. Isn't that right, dear?" Tanisha looked from Gianna to Jason, searching his face for any sign of the man she thought she'd married. But all she saw was mild irritation and distraction. "Jason," she began, her voice trembling. "Your mother, she—" "Not now, Tanisha," Jason cut her off, his tone sharp. "We're about to do the bouquet toss, and Veronica says it's crucial for the photos. Can't you two just get along for one night?" The casual dismissal of her feelings, coupled with the triumphant glint in Gianna's eyes, was the final straw. Something inside Tanisha snapped, years of doubts and insecurities bubbling to the surface. "Get along?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Your mother has spent the entire night insulting me, my family, my background. She's made it abundantly clear that she thinks I'm nothing more than a charity case, and you haven't said a word in my defense all night." Jason's eyes widened, darting between Tanisha and his mother. "Tanisha, calm down. You're making a scene. Mom didn't mean anything by it, did you, Mom?" Gianna's face was a mask of innocence. "Of course not. I'm sure Tanisha is just feeling a bit overwhelmed. It's been such a long day after all." Tanisha felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat. "Overwhelmed? Is that what you call it when someone systematically tries to tear you down on what's supposed to be the happiest day of your life?" "That's enough," Jason snapped, grabbing Tanisha's arm. "You're embarrassing yourself. And more importantly, you're embarrassing me. Pull yourself together." The physical contact coupled with the harshness of Jason's words sent a jolt through Tanisha. She wrenched her arm free, stumbling back a step. "Don't touch me," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare touch me." For a moment, the three of them stood frozen in a tableau of tension. Then, from inside the ballroom, they heard the DJ's voice announcing the bouquet toss. Jason ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "We need to get back inside. Tanisha, fix your makeup. We can discuss this later." As he turned to go, Gianna following close behind, Tanisha felt something inside her shatter. The carefully constructed image of the perfect couple, the dream of a happily ever after, all of it crumbled to dust in that moment. She watched as Jason and Gianna rejoined the party, seamlessly slipping back into their roles of doting son and proud mother. Through the glass doors, she could see Jada searching the crowd, concern etched on her face. Tanisha turned back to the Los Angeles skyline, her mind racing. She thought of her parents, of the sacrifices they'd made to give her a better life. She thought of her own dreams, the ones she'd slowly begun to set aside in her efforts to fit into Jason's world. And in that moment, standing alone on a terrace high above the city of dreams, Tanisha Johnson made a decision that would change the course of her life forever. As the muffled sounds of the reception filtered through the glass doors, Tanisha stood frozen on the terrace, her mind reeling from the confrontation with Jason and Gianna. The cool night air that had once felt refreshing now chilled her to the bone, goosebumps rising on her exposed skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, the delicate beadwork of her wedding gown rough against her palms. The terrace doors slid open once more, and Tanisha steeled herself, expecting to face Jada, or perhaps one of her concerned relatives. Instead, Jason's imposing figure filled the doorway, his expression a mix of frustration and barely contained anger. "What the hell was that about?" he hissed, stepping onto the terrace and letting the door close behind him. "Do you have any idea how it looked when you didn't show up for the bouquet toss?" Tanisha turned to face him, drawing herself up to her full height. "How it looked," she repeated, disbelief coloring her tone. "That's what you're worried about. How it looked." Jason ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in a way that would have once made Tanisha's heart skip a beat. Now, it only served to highlight how far they'd drifted apart. "Of course that's what I'm worried about," he snapped. "This whole wedding is about appearances, Tanisha. You knew that going in. It's not just about us. It's about the merger, about my family's reputation, about everything except love," Tanisha cut in, her voice sharp. "Tell me something, Jason. When did I stop being your partner and start being just another asset to manage?" Jason's eyes widened, genuine surprise flashing across his features before he schooled them back into a mask of irritation. "Don't be dramatic, Tanisha. Of course I love you, but love doesn't pay the bills or secure multi-million-dollar business deals." "No," Tanisha agreed, a sad smile playing at her lips. "But it should be enough to make you stand up for your wife when your mother spends the entire night insulting her and her family." Jason sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "My mother can be difficult. You know that. But she means well. She just wants what's best for me, for us." "What's best for us?" Tanisha echoed, incredulity rising in her voice. "Jason, she told me to my face that I don't belong here, that I'm nothing more than an experiment for you. And you've done nothing but prove her right all night." "That's not fair," Jason protested, but his words lacked conviction. "I've been busy networking, securing our future. Someone has to think about the long term here." Tanisha felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat. "Our future, Jason, look at me. Really look at me. Do you even see me anymore? Or am I just another accessory to you now, like your fancy watch or your tailored suits?" For a moment, something like regret flickered in Jason's eyes. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from Tanisha's face. "Tanisha, baby, you know that's not true. I love you. We can work this out. Just come back inside, put on a smile, and we can talk about all this later." "Okay." Tanisha stared at him, searching his face for any trace of the man she'd fallen in love with, but all she saw was a stranger, more concerned with appearances and business deals than the woman he'd just pledged to love and cherish for the rest of his life. "No," she said softly, taking a step back. "No, I don't think I will." Jason's expression hardened, his hand dropping to his side. "What do you mean, no? This isn't a request, Tanisha. We have guests waiting, expectations to meet. You can't just—" "Can't what?" Tanisha challenged, her voice gaining strength. "Can't have my own thoughts, my own feelings. Can't expect my husband to stand up for me on our wedding day." Jason's jaw clenched, a vein pulsing at his temple. "You're being unreasonable. You knew what you were signing up for when you married me. My world, my rules. If you can't handle that, then maybe—" "Maybe what?" Tanisha pressed, taking a step towards him. "Maybe your mother was right. Maybe I don't belong here after all." "Damn it, Tanisha!" Jason exploded, his carefully cultivated composure finally cracking. "Yes, maybe she was right. Maybe this whole thing was a mistake. Is that what you want to hear?" The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Tanisha felt as if all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Even in her darkest moments of doubt, she'd never truly believed Jason felt that way. "A mistake," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what I am to you, a mistake." Jason's eyes widened as he realized what he'd said. "Tanisha, I didn't mean—" "No," she cut him off, her voice gaining strength. "No, I think you did mean it. I think you've been thinking it for a long time. Well, let me tell you something, Jason Hartley. The only mistake here was me believing that you ever truly loved me for who I am." She turned away from him, moving towards the balustrade. The lights of Los Angeles sprawled out before her, a glittering reminder of all the dreams she'd put on hold to fit into Jason's world. "Tanisha, wait," Jason called, his voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "You can't just walk away. Think about what you're throwing away here. The lifestyle, the connections, the opportunities." Tanisha whirled around to face him, fire in her eyes. "Is that all you think I care about? Money, status, do you really know me so little?" Jason's face contorted with frustration. "What I know is that I've given you everything. A beautiful home, expensive gifts, a wedding most people can only dream of. And this is how you repay me? By throwing a tantrum on our wedding night?" "A tantrum," Tanisha repeated, her voice rising. "Is that what you call it when someone stands up for themselves? When they refuse to be belittled and pushed aside?" Jason advanced on her, his earlier composure completely shattered. "What I call it is ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed." "Sacrificed?" Tanisha cut in, her laugh bitter and hollow. "What exactly have you sacrificed, Jason? Your precious image? Your family's approval? Because from where I'm standing, I'm the only one who's been asked to give up pieces of myself to fit into your world." The tension between them crackled like electricity, years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings bubbling to the surface. Jason's face was a mask of rage, his carefully cultivated image of the perfect, controlled businessman completely shattered. "You have no idea," he snarled, looming over her. "No idea what it takes to succeed in my world, the pressure, the expectations." "Oh, I think I have a pretty good idea," Tanisha shot back, refusing to be intimidated. "I've spent the last 2 years trying to live up to those expectations, changing everything about myself to fit your mold. Well, I'm done, Jason. I'm done shrinking myself to make you look bigger." Something in Jason snapped. His hand shot out, faster than Tanisha could react, and the sharp crack of palm meeting cheek echoed across the terrace. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Tanisha's head was turned to the side, her cheek stinging from the impact. Jason stood frozen, his hand still raised, shock written across his features as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd just done. The terrace doors burst open, a crowd of guests spilling out, drawn by the commotion. Gasps and murmurs filled the air as they took in the scene before them. Tanisha slowly turned her head back to face Jason, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain, anger, and something else. A fierce, unshakable resolve. "We're done," she said, her voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "This marriage is over." A hush fell over the assembled crowd. Jada pushed her way to the front, her face a mask of concern and fury. "Tanisha, oh my God, are you okay?" Before Tanisha could respond, another voice cut through the silence. "I saw everything, and I've got it all on video." Heads turned to see a tall, elegant woman in her late 40s step forward. Her dark hair was streaked with silver, and her eyes were sharp with intelligence and determination. "Rebecca Collins," she introduced herself, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "I'm an activist and lawyer, specializing in domestic violence cases. And what I just witnessed is grounds for both criminal charges and a civil suit." Jason, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally found his voice. "Now wait just a minute," he began, but Rebecca cut him off with a raised hand. "I suggest you don't say another word without your lawyer present, Mr. Hartley," she advised, her tone icy. Then, turning to Tanisha, her expression softened. "Mrs. Johnson, if you'd like to press charges, I'd be more than happy to represent you." Tanisha's mind was reeling. The events of the last few minutes felt surreal, like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But as she looked around at the shocked faces of the guests, at Jada's concern, at Rebecca's steady presence, something inside her solidified. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Yes, I want to press charges, and I want a divorce." A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Gianna, who had been hovering at the edge of the group, pushed her way forward. "Now let's not be hasty," she began, her voice sickly sweet. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. Tanisha, dear, why don't you come inside and we can talk about this like civilized people?" "I think Mrs. Johnson has made her position quite clear," Rebecca interjected smoothly. and I would advise against any attempts to pressure or coerce her. Now, if you'll excuse us, my client and I need to speak privately." With that, Rebecca gently guided Tanisha towards the terrace doors, Jada falling into step beside them. As they passed Jason, Tanisha paused for a moment, looking up at the man she had thought would be her partner for life. "I hope it was worth it," she said softly. "Your precious image, your family's approval. I hope it keeps you warm at night." Then, with her head held high, Tanisha walked back into the reception hall. The crowd parted before her like the Red Sea, whispers and shocked murmurs following in her wake. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could practically hear the gossip machine whirring into action. But for the first time in years, she didn't care what anyone thought. As they reached a quiet corner of the hall, Rebecca turned to Tanisha, her expression grave but kind. "Mrs. Johnson, I know this is an incredibly difficult and overwhelming situation, but I want you to know that you have options, and you have support." Jada, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Nish, whatever you need, I'm here. We all are." She gestured to where Tanisha's parents were hurrying towards them, concern etched on their faces. Tanisha took a deep breath, feeling as if she was stepping out of a fog that had surrounded her for years. What happens now?" she asked, looking to Rebecca. The lawyer's smile was reassuring. "Now we take this one step at a time. First, we need to get you somewhere safe for the night. Then tomorrow we'll start the process of filing for divorce and pressing charges." "Charges?" Tanisha's mother gasped as she reached them. "Tanisha, baby, what happened?" As Tanisha briefly explained the situation to her parents, Rebecca pulled out a business card and handed it to Jada. "This is the number for a women's shelter I work closely with. They can provide a safe place for Mrs. Johnson to stay tonight, as well as counseling and support services." Jada nodded, her expression determined. "I'll make the call. Nish, you're not going through this alone. You hear me?" Tanisha felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by the support surrounding her. For so long she had felt isolated in Jason's world, cut off from her own support system. Now faced with the biggest crisis of her life, she was reminded of the strength of her true family, not by blood or marriage, but by love and loyalty. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "All of you." As the small group made plans for the immediate future, across the room, Jason was engaged in a heated discussion with his parents and what appeared to be his lawyer. His face was pale, his earlier bravado replaced by barely concealed panic. Rebecca noticed Tanisha's gaze drift towards Jason and gently touched her arm. "Mrs. Johnson, I know this is all happening very quickly, but I need to ask, do you have access to any of your husband's financial records, emails, anything that might be relevant to building our case?" Tanisha blinked, caught off guard by the question. I'm not sure. Jason always kept his business affairs separate, but..." She paused, a memory surfacing. There was a laptop in his home office. He was always very protective of it, said it had sensitive company information. Rebecca nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That could be very useful. Mrs. Johnson, I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to understand, what happened tonight, as horrible as it was, might just be the tip of the iceberg. Men like Jason, men who are used to power and control, often have other skeletons in their closets." Tanisha felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Rebecca replied carefully, "that as we build your case, we might uncover other illegal activities, financial irregularities, ethical violations, possibly even criminal behavior. Are you prepared for that possibility?" For a moment, Tanisha hesitated. Despite everything, a small part of her still wanted to protect Jason, still clung to the image of the man she thought she had married. But then she remembered the coldness in his eyes as he struck her, the casual cruelty of his words. "Yes," she said firmly, "yes, I'm prepared. Whatever it takes to make sure he never does this to anyone else." Rebecca's smile was grim, but approving. "Good. Then let's get started. Tomorrow we'll file the initial paperwork for the divorce and the restraining order. Then we'll start digging. Something tells me there's a lot more to Jason Hartley than meets the eye." As they made their way towards the exit, Tanisha paused for one last look at the reception hall. The dream wedding she had spent months planning now lay in ruins, shattered like so many of her illusions about love and marriage. But as she turned away, surrounded by the people who truly cared for her, Tanisha felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil, but for the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Not Jason Hartley's trophy wife, not a project to be molded and shaped, but Tanisha Johnson, strong, resilient, and ready to reclaim her life. As they stepped out into the cool Los Angeles night, Tanisha took a deep breath, feeling as if she was tasting freedom for the first time. The city stretched out before her, a landscape of possibilities she had almost forgotten existed. "Ready?" Jada asked, squeezing her hand. Tanisha nodded, a small but genuine smile playing at her lips. "Ready." And with that, they walked away from the glittering hotel, leaving behind the wreckage of a wedding and stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. The first chapter of Tanisha's new life was about to begin, and this time, she would be the author of her own story. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds of the small apartment provided by the women's shelter, Tanisha stirred from a fitful sleep. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. Then, like a tidal wave, the memories of the previous night came crashing back. The wedding, the confrontation, the slap that had shattered her world. She sat up slowly, wincing at the dull ache in her cheek where Jason's hand had connected. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil raging inside her. Shame, anger, fear, and an overwhelming sense of loss swirled together in a toxic cocktail that threatened to overwhelm her. A soft knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. "Tanisha," Jada's voice called softly. "You awake, honey? I've got coffee. Come in," Tanisha replied, her voice hoarse from crying and lack of sleep. Jada entered, balancing 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Her usually impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, evidence of the long night they'd both endured. She handed Tanisha a mug and perched on the edge of the bed, her eyes full of concern. "How you holding up?" she asked gently. Tanisha took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth seep into her bones before answering. I don't know, Jay. It doesn't feel real. Like any minute now I'm going to wake up and realize it was all just a horrible nightmare." Jada reached out and squeezed her hand. "I know, sweetie. But you're not alone in this, okay? We're all here for you." As if on cue, Tanisha's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Rebecca Collins, the lawyer who had stepped in the night before. "Meeting set up with my team at 10 a.m. We'll pick you up at 9:30. Stay strong." Tanisha showed the message to Jada, a mix of relief and anxiety washing over her. "I guess this is really happening, huh?" Jada nodded, her expression resolute. "It is, and you're going to get through this, Nish. You're stronger than you know." An hour later, freshly showered and dressed in clothes Jada had brought from her apartment, Tanisha stood outside the shelter, waiting for Rebecca. Her stomach churned with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The events of the past 24 hours still felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. A sleek black sedan pulled up, and Rebecca stepped out, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. "Mrs. Johnson," she greeted with a warm smile. "Ready to get started?" The drive to Rebecca's law office was filled with a tense silence, broken only by Rebecca's occasional comments about what to expect in the meeting. Tanisha nodded along, trying to absorb the information through the fog of emotional exhaustion. As they entered the imposing office building in downtown Los Angeles, Tanisha felt a flutter of panic. "Rebecca," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, What if I'm making a mistake? What if this is all just a big misunderstanding?" Rebecca stopped and turned to face her, her expression serious but kind. "Tanisha," she said, dropping the formality, "what happened to you last night was not a misunderstanding. It was abuse, plain and simple. And from what you've told me about your relationship, it wasn't an isolated incident. The emotional manipulation, the control, the dismissal of your feelings, those are all forms of abuse too." Tanisha felt tears welling up in her eyes. "But he never hit me before. Maybe if I had just tried harder, been more understanding." Rebecca shook her head firmly. "No, that kind of thinking is exactly what abusers count on. You are not responsible for his actions. You did nothing to deserve this." As they rode the elevator to Rebecca's office, Tanisha took deep breaths, trying to center herself. When the doors opened, they were greeted by a team of legal professionals, all looking at Tanisha with a mixture of sympathy and determination. Over the next few hours, Tanisha recounted every detail of her relationship with Jason, the whirlwind romance, the gradual erosion of her self-esteem, the increasing isolation from her friends and family. As she spoke, she began to see patterns she had been blind to before, moments where Jason's charm had masked his controlling nature. "Mrs. Johnson," one of the junior lawyers said gently, "based on what you've told us, we believe we have a strong case not just for divorce, but for a significant settlement. Mr. Hartley's actions constitute emotional abuse, and the incident at the wedding provides clear evidence of physical abuse." Tanisha nodded, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. What happens next?" Rebecca leaned forward, her expression serious. "Now, we start digging. We'll file for divorce and a restraining order immediately. But we also need to look into Jason's finances and business dealings. Men like him often have other secrets they're hiding." As the days turned into weeks, Tanisha found herself in a whirlwind of legal proceedings, counseling sessions, and media scrutiny. The story of the bride assaulted at her own wedding had captured the public's imagination, and Tanisha found herself thrust into the spotlight. At first, the attention was overwhelming. Paparazzi camped outside the shelter, forcing Tanisha to move in with Jada for privacy. Social media exploded with opinions, some supportive, others cruelly judgmental. But as more details of Jason's behavior came to light, public opinion began to shift decisively in Tanisha's favor. Through it all, Rebecca was a constant source of strength and guidance. Their professional relationship gradually evolved into a friendship, with Rebecca becoming a mentor figure to Tanisha. She helped Tanisha navigate the complexities of the legal system, media, and her own emotional journey. "You're doing incredibly well," Rebecca assured her one afternoon as they pored over financial documents in her office. "Many women in your situation would have crumbled under the pressure, but you're standing tall." Tanisha managed a small smile. "Some days I don't feel very tall, but I'm trying." As the investigation into Jason's affairs deepened, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Financial irregularities, questionable business practices, and evidence of bribery and corruption came to light. What had started as a divorce case was rapidly evolving into something much bigger. "Tanisha," Rebecca said one day, her expression grave, "we've uncovered something significant. It appears that Jason has been involved in a complex scheme of financial fraud and insider trading. The amounts we're talking about, it's in the millions." Tanisha felt the blood drain from her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I had no idea." Rebecca nodded sympathetically. "I know this is a lot to take in, but it's important that you understand. This information strengthens our case significantly. It also means that the scope of this trial is going to expand. Are you prepared for that?" Tanisha took a deep breath, thinking about everything she had been through, everything she had learned about herself in the past few weeks. She thought about other women who might be trapped in situations like hers, afraid to speak out. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm prepared. Whatever it takes to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." As news of Jason's alleged crimes broke, the media frenzy reached new heights. Tanisha found herself at the center of a story that had expanded far beyond a domestic dispute. Women's rights organizations rallied around her, holding her up as a symbol of resilience and courage. But with the increased support came increased pressure. Jason's legal team launched a vicious smear campaign, painting Tanisha as a gold digger who had fabricated abuse allegations when her plan to marry into wealth backfired. The constant scrutiny and attacks took their toll, and there were days when Tanisha wondered if she had the strength to see it through. It was during one of these low moments that Rebecca suggested something unexpected. "Tanisha," she said gently, "I think it might be helpful for you to speak out, to tell your story in your own words." Tanisha's eyes widened in panic. I don't know if I can do that. What if I mess up? What if no one believes me?" Rebecca smiled encouragingly. "They will believe you because your truth is powerful. And you won't be alone. We'll prepare you, coach you. But I think it's important for people to see the real you, not the caricature Jason's team is trying to create." After much deliberation and preparation, Tanisha agreed to an interview with a respected news program. As the cameras rolled, she told her story, not just of the wedding night, but of the years of subtle manipulation and control that had led up to it. "I'm not here to seek revenge," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm here because I want other women to know that they're not alone, that it's okay to speak up, to demand respect and equality in their relationships." The response to the interview was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from around the country. Women shared their own stories of abuse and survival, many crediting Tanisha's courage for giving them the strength to leave their own toxic relationships. As the trial date approached, the pressure intensified. Jason's team made several attempts to settle out of court, offering increasingly large sums of money in exchange for Tanisha's silence. But she stood firm, buoyed by the support of her legal team and the countless strangers who had been touched by her story. The night before the trial was set to begin, Tanisha sat in Rebecca's office, reviewing their strategy one last time. The weight of what lay ahead settled heavily on her shoulders. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "what if we lose? What if after all this he gets away with it?" Rebecca reached across the desk and took Tanisha's hand. "Listen to me. Whatever happens in that courtroom tomorrow, you've already won. You've reclaimed your voice, your power. You've inspired countless others to do the same. That's a victory that no judge or jury can take away from you." Tanisha nodded, feeling a surge of determination. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. "Rebecca, thank you for everything." Rebecca smiled warmly. "You did all the hard work, Tanisha. I just gave you the tools. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow, we make history." As Tanisha left the office and stepped out into the cool Los Angeles night, she felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. Whatever happened tomorrow, she knew she was no longer the same woman who had walked down the aisle all those weeks ago. She was stronger now, wiser, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The city lights twinkled around her, a reminder of the dreams she had once put on hold. But now those dreams felt within reach again. As she hailed a taxi, Tanisha allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow would be difficult, but it was also the first day of the rest of her life. And for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see what that life might hold. The morning of the trial dawned bright and clear, the Los Angeles sky a brilliant blue that seemed to mock the gravity of the day ahead. Tanisha stood before the mirror in her modest apartment, smoothing down her conservative navy suit. The woman who looked back at her was a far cry from the beaming bride of just a few months ago. Her eyes, once bright with hope and love, now held a steely determination. A gentle knock at the door announced Rebecca's arrival. The lawyer entered, her presence immediately filling the room with an air of calm confidence. "Ready?" she asked, giving Tanisha an appraising look. Tanisha took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As I'll ever be." The drive to the courthouse was a surreal experience. The streets were lined with reporters and camera crews, all clamoring for a glimpse of the woman at the center of what had become one of the most high-profile cases in recent Los Angeles history. As their car pulled up to the courthouse steps, Tanisha was momentarily overwhelmed by the sea of faces and flashing cameras. Rebecca squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Remember, you're not alone in this. We've got the truth on our side." With those words bolstering her courage, Tanisha stepped out of the car. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a cacophony of shouted questions and camera shutters. She kept her head high, her gaze fixed straight ahead as she and Rebecca made their way up the courthouse steps. Inside, the courtroom was a hive of activity. Journalists scribbled furiously in notepads, sketch artists captured the scene with swift, sure strokes, and a palpable tension hung in the air. As Tanisha took her seat at the plaintiff's table, she couldn't help but steal a glance at the defense side. Jason sat there, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, his expression a mask of cool indifference. Beside him, his high-powered legal team shuffled papers and whispered amongst themselves. For a brief moment, his eyes met Tanisha's, and she felt a chill run down her spine at the coldness she saw there. The bailiff's voice rang out, calling the court to order, and Judge Miranda Holbrook entered. A hush fell over the room as she took her seat, her piercing gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice crisp and authoritative, "we are here today in the case of Johnson versus Hartley. This is a complex case involving allegations of domestic abuse, financial fraud, and corporate malfeasance. I expect all parties to conduct themselves with the utmost decorum. Let's begin." Rebecca stood, her posture radiating confidence. "Your Honor, members of the jury, we are here today because on what should have been the happiest day of Tanisha Johnson's life, her trust was betrayed in the most violent and public way imaginable. But as you will see, this incident was merely the culmination of years of emotional abuse, manipulation, and deceit." As Rebecca laid out their case, Tanisha found herself transported back to the events of the past few months. She relived the pain, the fear, the gradual erosion of her self-esteem. But now, sitting in this courtroom, she also felt a growing sense of empowerment. Her story was finally being told. Jason's lawyer, a shark-like man named Douglas Roth, presented their defense next. His words were smooth, calculated to sow seeds of doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a simple case of a gold digger's plan gone wrong. Ms. Johnson, upon realizing that her husband's wealth came with expectations of class and decorum she couldn't meet, fabricated these outrageous allegations. Tanisha felt her cheeks burn with anger, but Rebecca's steadying hand on her arm kept her composed. The first few days of the trial were a blur of testimony. Character witnesses from both sides painted starkly different pictures of Jason and Tanisha's relationship. Jada took the stand, her testimony a damning account of the gradual changes she'd observed in her friend over the course of her relationship with Jason. "It was like watching someone slowly disappear," Jada said, her voice thick with emotion. "The Tanisha I knew, strong, independent, full of life, she just faded away, and in her place was this shadow of a person, always looking to Jason for approval, always afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing." Jason's mother, Gianna, presented a counter-narrative, her aristocratic features arranged in an expression of aggrieved concern. "Jason has always been a perfect gentleman," she insisted. "If anything, he was too generous, too trusting. I tried to warn him that someone of Tanisha's background might not appreciate the privileges he was offering her. But it was the financial evidence that truly turned the tide of the trial." Rebecca's team had painstakingly pieced together a complex web of fraudulent transactions, insider trading, and corporate espionage. As the evidence mounted, Jason's cool facade began to crack. On the fifth day of the trial, a bombshell dropped. Rebecca called to the stand a surprise witness, Carlos Mendoza, Jason's former assistant. Carlos, visibly nervous but determined, recounted a damning series of events. "Mr. Hartley instructed me to alter financial records, to backdate documents. When I expressed concern about the legality of these actions, he threatened my job, my visa status. He said he owned me, that no one would believe some immigrant over him." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and Judge Holbrook had to call for order. Jason's face had turned an alarming shade of red, his carefully maintained composure finally slipping. As the trial progressed, the media frenzy outside the courthouse reached fever pitch. Tanisha's story had struck a chord with the public, sparking intense debates about domestic violence, corporate corruption, and the intersection of race and class in American society. Support rallies were held on the courthouse steps, with survivors of domestic abuse sharing their stories and calling for justice. On the other side, a smaller but vocal group of Jason's supporters decried what they saw as a witch hunt against a successful businessman. Inside the courtroom, the most dramatic moment came when Tanisha herself took the stand. As she recounted the events of her wedding night, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes, a hush fell over the room. "I thought I was living a fairy tale," she said, her gaze sweeping across the jury. "But it turned out to be a nightmare. Jason didn't want a partner. He wanted a possession, something he could mold and control to fit his image of the perfect wife." As she described the moment Jason had struck her, several jurors visibly flinched. Even Jason's most ardent supporters in the gallery seemed shaken. During cross-examination, Roth tried to paint Tanisha as an opportunist, but her quiet dignity and unwavering testimony seemed to resonate with the jury. When Roth attempted to suggest that she had provoked Jason's attack, the backlash from the gallery was immediate and fierce. Judge Holbrook had to threaten to clear the courtroom to restore order. As the trial entered its third week, the pressure began to show on Jason. His polished veneer cracked further with each new piece of evidence presented. When he finally took the stand in his own defense, gone was the charming, confident businessman. In his place was a man clearly unused to having his actions questioned. Under Rebecca's skilled cross-examination, Jason's testimony began to unravel. He contradicted himself several times, growing increasingly agitated as Rebecca calmly picked apart his story. The turning point came when Rebecca produced a series of emails between Jason and his business partners, discussing their fraudulent schemes in thinly veiled language. "Mr. Hartley," Rebecca said, her voice deceptively gentle, "can you explain to the court what you meant when you wrote, and I quote, 'The golden goose is ready for plucking'? Time to cook the books and feast." Jason's face drained of color, He looked to his lawyers, but they could only watch helplessly as their case imploded. That was just a joke, he stammered. Business humor. Rebecca's smile was razor sharp. A joke, I see. And was it also a joke when you instructed your assistant to backdate financial records? Or when you bribed city officials to overlook safety violations in your properties? As Jason floundered, unable to provide satisfactory answers, Tanisha felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For so long she had doubted herself, wondered if she was overreacting. But now, seeing Jason exposed for what he truly was, she felt validated in a way she hadn't thought possible. The closing arguments were a study in contrasts. Roth, his earlier swagger diminished, tried to salvage what he could of their case. He painted Jason as a successful businessman brought low by a vindictive ex-wife, a victim of his own generosity. Rebecca, on the other hand, delivered a powerful summation that left many in the courtroom fighting back tears. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice ringing with conviction, "what we've seen over these past weeks is not just the story of one woman's abuse and one man's crimes. This is a story about power, about the way it can corrupt, and about the courage it takes to stand up to that corruption." She walked slowly in front of the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. Tanisha Johnson came into this courtroom seeking justice, not just for herself, but for every person who has ever felt powerless in the face of abuse. By finding in her favor, you have the opportunity to send a message that no one, no matter how wealthy or well-connected, is above the law. As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, a tense silence fell over the courtroom. Tanisha sat rigid in her seat, her heart pounding. Everything hinged on what happened next. The wait was excruciating. Hours stretched into days as the jury deliberated. Speculation ran rampant in the media, with pundits endlessly debating the possible outcomes. Through it all, Tanisha tried to maintain her composure, drawing strength from the support of her friends, family, and the countless strangers who had rallied to her cause. Finally, on the afternoon of the fourth day of deliberations, word came that the jury had reached a verdict. As Tanisha retook her seat in the now familiar courtroom, she felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice. Judge Holbrook addressed the court, her voice solemn. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "We have, Your Honor." As the verdicts were read out, Tanisha felt as if she were floating outside her body. Guilty, 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 on all counts. The domestic abuse charges, the financial fraud, the corporate espionage. With each pronouncement, Jason seemed to shrink in his seat, the full weight of his actions finally crashing down upon him. Then came the civil penalties. The jury awarded Tanisha a staggering sum, $10 million in compensatory damages and an additional $50 million in punitive damages. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. It was one of the largest awards in a domestic violence case in California history. But it was the judge's final words that truly drove home the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Mr. Hartley," Judge Holbrook said, her voice cutting through the noise like a whip, "your actions have demonstrated a callous disregard for the law, for basic human decency, and for the trust placed in you by your investors, your employees, and most egregiously, by the woman who agreed to be your wife. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 15 years in federal prison." As the full impact of the verdict sank in, Tanisha felt a maelstrom of emotions wash over her. Relief, vindication, a touch of sadness for the man she had once loved, and overwhelming gratitude for those who had stood by her through this ordeal. She turned to Rebecca, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." Rebecca enveloped her in a fierce hug. "You did it, Tanisha. Your courage made this possible." As they made their way out of the courtroom, the roar of the crowd outside was deafening. Supporters cheered, journalists shouted questions, cameras flashed incessantly. But for Tanisha, it all faded into background noise. Standing on the courthouse steps, bathed in the warm California sunlight, she felt truly free for the first time in years. The road ahead was uncertain. She knew the media attention wouldn't fade overnight, and there would be challenges as she rebuilt her life. But as she looked out at the sea of faces, many tear-streaked and jubilant, she felt a surge of hope. This victory wasn't just for her. It was for every person who had ever felt trapped, powerless, or alone. It was proof that speaking out, standing up for oneself could lead to real change. As Rebecca gently guided her towards their waiting car, Tanisha took one last look back at the courthouse. A chapter of her life had closed today, but another full of possibility and promise was just beginning. And for the first time in a long, long while, Tanisha Johnson smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes and lit up her entire being. The future, once so dark and uncertain, now stretched out before her bright with potential, and she was ready to embrace it, one brave step at a time. In the weeks following the trial, Tanisha found herself in a position she had never imagined, with a substantial settlement and the eyes of the nation upon her. The media frenzy that had surrounded the trial showed no signs of abating, and Tanisha quickly realized that her story had resonated with people far beyond the confines of the Los Angeles courtroom. As she sat in her modest apartment, surrounded by stacks of papers, financial advisors' recommendations, investment proposals, and countless letters from well-wishers, Tanisha felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This money, born from pain and struggle, represented more than just financial security. It was an opportunity to make a difference, to turn her personal tragedy into a force for positive change. "What am I going to do with all of this?" she mused aloud, her fingers tracing the edges of a particularly impressive investment portfolio. Jada, who had become an even more constant presence in Tanisha's life since the trial, looked up from her laptop. "Well, you could always buy a private island and never deal with the outside world again," she quipped, a mischievous glint in her eye. Tanisha laughed, the sound still somewhat foreign to her ears after months of stress and tension. "Tempting, but I think I've had enough of isolation to last a lifetime." As she sifted through the papers, her eyes kept returning to a pamphlet buried beneath the more glossy offerings. It was a simple brochure for a women's shelter, similar to the one that had provided her sanctuary in the immediate aftermath of her ill-fated wedding. The sight of it stirred something within her, a memory of the fear and uncertainty she had felt, but also of the strength and support she had found there. "You know," Tanisha said slowly, an idea beginning to take shape in her mind. "I think I might have an idea." Over the next few months, Tanisha threw herself into research and planning. She met with counselors, social workers, and business advisors. She visited shelters and community centers, absorbing everything she could about the challenges faced by women in situations similar to the one she had escaped. The more she learned, the clearer her vision became. She wanted to create a space that went beyond providing immediate safety, a place that could offer long-term support, education, and empowerment to women looking to rebuild their lives. "The Phoenix Center," Tanisha announced one day, her eyes shining with excitement as she unveiled her plans to Rebecca and Jada. "A place where women can rise from the ashes of their past and build a new future." The concept was ambitious, a comprehensive center that would offer not just shelter, but also legal aid, counseling services, job training, and financial literacy programs. It would be a haven and a launch pad, a place where women could heal and grow. "It's going to take a lot of work," Rebecca cautioned, though her smile betrayed her enthusiasm for the project. "And you'll be putting yourself in the public eye even more." Tanisha nodded, a determined set to her jaw. "I know. But if my story can help other women find their strength, then it's worth it." The process of establishing the Phoenix Center was not without its challenges. There were zoning issues to navigate, staff to hire, and programs to develop. Tanisha found herself working longer hours than she ever had before, but for the first time in years, she felt truly alive. As news of the center spread, Tanisha was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from the community. Volunteers offered their time and skills, local businesses provided donations, and women from all walks of life reached out to share their stories and offer encouragement. The day of the center's grand opening dawned bright and clear. As Tanisha stood before the gleaming new building, its facade adorned with a mural of a rising phoenix, she felt a surge of pride and emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, addressing the crowd gathered for the opening ceremony, "welcome to the Phoenix Center. This place represents not just my journey, but the journey of countless women who have faced adversity and emerged stronger." As she spoke, Tanisha's gaze swept over the assembled faces. She saw Jada beaming with pride, Rebecca, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, her parents who had become her rocks through this entire ordeal. And beyond them, she saw the faces of women she had met during her research, survivors, fighters, phoenixes in their own right. This center is more than just a building, Tanisha continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. It's a promise. A promise that no woman has to face abuse or injustice alone. A promise that there is always hope, always a chance for a new beginning. In the months that followed, the Phoenix Center quickly became a beacon of hope in the community. Women who had once felt trapped and helpless found a place where they could breathe, heal, and grow. The center's legal aid program, spearheaded by Rebecca, helped countless women navigate the complexities of leaving abusive situations. The job training and financial literacy programs equipped women with the skills they needed to achieve independence. Tanisha threw herself into the work, often spending long hours at the center. She led support groups, mentored women one-on-one, and continually sought ways to improve and expand the center's services. The work was challenging, often emotionally draining, but Tanisha found it incredibly fulfilling. As the center's impact grew, so did its recognition. Media outlets that had once hounded Tanisha for details of her personal trauma now sought her out as an expert on domestic violence and women's empowerment. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story and the mission of the Phoenix Center at conferences and events across the country. One evening, as Tanisha was preparing to leave the center after a particularly long day, she found herself lingering in the main lobby. The walls were adorned with artwork created by the center's residents, vibrant, hopeful pieces that spoke of resilience and rebirth. A bulletin board nearby was crowded with success stories, women who had found jobs, secured housing, or simply rediscovered their smiles. As she stood there, taking it all in, Tanisha felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Maria, one of the center's first residents, standing behind her with a shy smile. "Ms. Johnson," Maria began, her voice soft but steady, "I just wanted to thank you. When I came here, I was broken. I didn't think I would ever feel whole again. But this place, the people here, you gave me back my life." Tanisha felt her throat tighten with emotion. She pulled Maria into a warm embrace, words failing her for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with unshed tears. "You did that yourself, Maria. We just provided the tools. Your strength, your courage, that was all you." As Maria walked away, Tanisha found herself reflecting on her own journey. The pain of her past still lingered, a dull ache that flared up in quiet moments. But it no longer defined her. Instead, it had become the catalyst for growth, for change, for a purpose larger than herself. She thought about the woman she had been on her wedding day, full of hope yet unknowingly trapped in a cycle of manipulation and control. That woman seemed like a stranger now, a distant memory of a life that no longer fit. In her place stood a new Tanisha, stronger, wiser, more compassionate, a woman who had taken her pain and transformed it into a force for good, a woman who had found her voice and used it to amplify the voices of others. As she finally made her way out of the center, Tanisha paused on the threshold, looking back at the space she had created. The Phoenix Center was more than just a building or a program. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a living, breathing embodiment of the idea that it's never too late for a new beginning. With a small smile playing on her lips, Tanisha stepped out into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It reminded her of the phoenix in the center's logo, vibrant, alive, rising. As she walked to her car, Tanisha felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road that had led her here had been long and painful, filled with unexpected turns and steep climbs. But standing on this side of it all, she wouldn't have changed a thing. Every tear, every moment of doubt, every struggle had led her to this place. A place where she could help others find the strength she had discovered within herself. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities. There was still so much work to be done, so many women to reach, so many lives to touch. But for the first time in a long time, Tanisha felt truly ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. As she drove home, the city lights twinkling around her, Tanisha found herself humming softly. It was an old song her grandmother used to sing, a melody about hope and perseverance. It seemed fitting now, a soundtrack to this new chapter of her life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new stories, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, Tanisha allowed herself to simply be, to exist in this moment of quiet triumph, to acknowledge how far she had come, and to look forward to all that was yet to be. The woman who had once felt trapped in a gilded cage had spread her wings and learned to fly. And in doing so, she had created a space where countless others could do the same. As Tanisha pulled into her driveway, she felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected journey, for the strength she had found within herself, and for the opportunity to help others find theirs. The Phoenix Center was more than just her legacy. It was a promise to every woman who had ever felt lost or alone, a promise that there was always hope, always a chance to rise, to heal, to soar. And as Tanisha drifted off to sleep that night, she did so with a heart full of purpose and a spirit ready to take on whatever the new day might bring. 5 years had passed since the grand opening of the Phoenix Center, and Tanisha Johnson stood at the podium, addressing a packed auditorium. The occasion was the center's 5th anniversary gala, a celebration of half a decade of transforming lives and empowering women. "When I started this journey," Tanisha began, her voice strong and confident, "I never imagined where it would lead. The Phoenix Center was born from pain, but it has blossomed into something beautiful, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit." As she spoke, Tanisha's gaze swept across the room. She saw familiar faces, women who had come to the center broken and left with renewed hope, volunteers who had given countless hours, and supporters who had believed in her vision from the start. In the front row, Jada beamed with pride. Her best friend had become her right-hand woman at the center, heading up the mentorship program with a mix of tough love and unwavering support that had become her trademark. Beside her sat Rebecca, now a renowned advocate for domestic violence survivors, her legal expertise having helped shape policy changes at both the state and national level. "In 5 years," Tanisha continued, "we've sheltered over 1,000 women, provided legal aid to hundreds more, and seen countless survivors reclaim their lives and their power. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The real impact is in the smiles I see every day, the confidence in the eyes of women who once thought they were trapped, the sound of laughter echoing through our halls." As she spoke, Tanisha reflected on her own journey. The woman she had been on her ill-fated wedding day felt like a stranger now. In her place stood a leader, a mentor, a voice for those who had been silenced. The pain of her past had not disappeared entirely. There were still nights when the memories haunted her dreams, but it no longer defined her. "Our work is far from over," Tanisha said, her voice taking on a note of determination. "As long as there are women facing abuse and injustice, the Phoenix Center will be here. We will continue to grow, to adapt, to fight for a world where every woman can live free from fear and full of hope." After the speech, as Tanisha mingled with the gala attendees, she found herself approached by an unexpected guest. Gianna Hartley, Jason's mother, stood before her, looking older and somehow smaller than Tanisha remembered. "Ms. Johnson," Gianna began, her voice lacking its former haughtiness, I owe you an apology. What I did, what I said, it was unforgivable. Seeing all this, understanding the impact of your work, I was wrong about you. So very wrong." Tanisha studied the older woman for a moment, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was a time when Gianna's words would have meant everything to her. Now they were simply words. "Thank you for saying that, Mrs. Hartley," Tanisha replied evenly. "I hope you found peace." As Gianna walked away, Tanisha felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Rebecca beside her, a questioning look in her eyes. "You okay?" Rebecca asked softly. Tanisha nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "You know what I really am? That woman once had so much power over me. Now I just feel sorry for her." Rebecca squeezed her shoulder. "You've come a long way, Tanisha. We all have." As the evening wound down, Tanisha found herself on the center's rooftop garden, a space she had created for quiet reflection. The Los Angeles skyline sparkled before her, a tapestry of lights and possibilities. Quite a view, isn't it? Tanisha turned to see Maria, one of the center's first residents and now a valued staff member, joining her at the railing. "It never gets old," Tanisha agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. "You know," Maria said finally, "I was thinking about the day I first came here. I was so scared, so lost. I couldn't imagine a future beyond the next day. And now, look at us." Tanisha smiled, remembering that day vividly. "You've come so far, Maria, we all have." Maria nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "That's thanks to you, Tanisha. You showed us it was possible to rise from the ashes. You gave us hope when we had none. Tanisha felt her own eyes welling up. She pulled Maria into a tight hug, overcome with emotion. We did it together, she whispered. All of us. We're all phoenixes here. As they separated, both wiping away tears, Tanisha looked out over the city once more. She thought about all the women out there who were still trapped, still afraid, still believing they had no way out. Her heart ached for them, but it also swelled with determination. We've got more work to do, she said softly. Maria nodded, understanding in her eyes. And we'll do it. Together. As they made their way back to the gala, Tanisha felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The path that had led her here had been painful, filled with betrayal and heartache. But it had also led her to her true calling, to a life filled with purpose and meaning. The Phoenix Center was more than just a refuge or a resource. It was a beacon of hope, a promise that no woman had to face her battles alone. And as Tanisha rejoined the celebration, surrounded by the community she had built, she knew that this was just the beginning. The future stretched out before her, full of challenges and opportunities. But Tanisha Johnson was ready to face them all, armed with the strength she had found within herself and the support of the incredible women around her. From the ashes of her past, she had risen, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to help others do the same. And in that rising, she had found not just healing, but a profound and lasting joy. The kind of joy that comes from living a life of purpose, from turning pain into power, from being a light in the darkness for others. As the night drew to a close, Tanisha stood once more at the podium, raising a glass for a final toast. To all the phoenixes, she said, her voice ringing with emotion and conviction, those who have risen, those who are rising, and those who have yet to discover their wings. May we continue to lift each other up to light the way and to soar higher than we ever thought possible. The room erupted in cheers and applause, the sound washing over Tanisha like a wave. In that moment, surrounded by the community she had built and the lives she had touched, Tanisha felt truly, completely whole. The woman who had once been a bride, betrayed and broken on her wedding day, was gone. In her place stood a warrior, a leader, a phoenix, rising ever higher, her wings spread wide, ready to embrace whatever the future might bring. If this story touched you in any way and sparked your curiosity for emotionally charged and inspiring tales, don't stop here. Subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and stay updated with new stories that might transform your perspective on life. Each video is an invitation to explore narratives that resonate deeply with the heart. Speaking of which, how about clicking on the next video? I'm sure it will move you as well. See you there.